Good morning. Thank you for joining us for the program evaluation series. Today's topic is prevention and intervention programs for children and youth who are neglected, delinquent, or at risk, also known as Title I, Part D, Subpart 2. Our agenda for today is as follows. We're going to be looking at an overview of the program evaluation series, statutory requirements, the program evaluation process, a look at reasonable, necessary, allowable, and inallocable, LEA application, examples, and then we'll close this out with other program evaluation series sessions. So the program evaluation series, what is it? How many are there? And why are we offering it? This is a description that was posted on the flyer that was disseminated across the listserv and then also on our website. I'm not going to read that to you, but in short, it is a requirement both at the federal and state level that you have a program evaluation just to make sure that you are investing your resources appropriately. And resources meaning your manpower, your time, funding. We want to make sure that it is worthy of the effort of you actually having that program. We're offering a total of 9 in this series. We've already covered 3, Title I Part A, Parent and Family Engagement Policy and Programs, Title I Part C, and today is Title I Part D. Our last session will be on June 4th, and that will conclude with Title V Part B, the Rural Education Initiative, which includes your RLIS as well as your SRSA. We love acronyms. We're offering this because we want to make sure that you have all the assistance that you need when providing a program evaluation and that the assistance is on your time, so on demand. If after viewing this, you have questions in regards to the general program evaluation steps that you may take and wanting a little bit more details, I would advise that you have a look at our general program evaluation series webinar that can also be found in the online learning center. Statutory requirements. Do I have to engage in this? We have Title I Part C. That's my mistake. It should also say Title I Part D. We have already covered Title I Part A, Part C, and Part D. We're going to be looking into further detail today. The statement of purpose I'm getting ready to show you should have it will have the overall information from Title I, and then we'll go a little deeper and look specifically at Title I Part D, the statement of purpose, as well as a few other mandates. So Title I statement of purpose is as follows. The purpose of this title is to provide all children significant opportunity to receive a fair, equitable, and high-quality education and to close educational achievement gaps. That comes straight from ESSA. Title I Part D statement of purpose, and this particular statement of purpose is coming straight from ESSA. It is the purpose of this part to improve educational services for children and youth in local and state institutions for neglected or delinquent children and youth so that such children and youth have the opportunity to meet the same challenging state academic content standards and challenging state student academic achievement standards that all children in the state are expected to meet. To provide such children and youth with the services needed to make a successful transition from institutionalization to further schooling or employment. And lastly, to prevent at-risk youth from dropping out of school and to provide dropouts in children and youth returning from correctional facilities or institutions for neglected or delinquent children and youth with a support system to ensure their continued education. So automatically, when I look at this, one of the things that pops out to me is the at-risk youth and the dropping out of school portion. As we know, in the state of Texas, we do have additional supplemental resources that can be paired with your Title I Part D, specifically when looking at your kiddos that are labeled at risk or who could possibly be considered at risk for dropping out. So as we go forward, just keep that in mind. I will say it here and there when you're thinking about coordination of funds with your Title I funding. Just know that there are also state options that you can use to help stretch your federal funding out as far as possible, especially when paired with your Title I Part D. So this is the program purpose here specifically for Part 1, and then in a moment I'll show you the purpose and program purposes for your Subpart 2. So in order to carry out the purpose of this part into from amounts appropriated under Section 10OTD, the Secretary shall make grants to state educational agencies to enable such agencies to award subgrants to state agencies and LEAs to establish or improve programs for education for neglected, delinquent, or at-risk children and youth. So when you look in the statute, when you look at ESSA, Subpart A is specific to the state education agencies. I included this because I wanted you to see that there is an alignment between what the program purposes are and the statement of purpose under the state education agency, which is your Subpart A, and Subpart B, which is what we typically interact with the most as LEAs. So this is the Subpart B, which is what we typically think of when you're referencing your neglected, delinquent children who are also at risk. The purpose of this subpart is to support the operation of local education agency programs that involve collaboration with locally operated correctional facilities, to carry out high-quality education programs to prepare children and youth for secondary school completion, training, employment, or further education, to provide activities to facilitate the transition of such children and youth from the correctional program to further education or employment, and lastly, to operate programs in local schools for children and youth returning from correctional facilities and programs which may serve at-risk children and youth. So as you can see, there is a direct alignment between the Subpart A, which is specific to states, and Subpart B, which is specific to local education agencies. In short, we're trying to make sure that we're helping our at-risk students who may drop out, who are coming from neglected, delinquent, or at-risk environments, the opportunity to stay in school so that they can graduate and further their employment or further their education. With program evaluation, this is always a requirement. Each state agency or local education agency that conducts a program under Subparts 1 or 2 shall evaluate the program, disaggregating data on participation by gender, race, ethnicity, and age, while protecting individual student privacy, not less than once every 3 years, to determine the program's impact on the ability of participants. Now, as a quick side note, even though the statute says not less than once every 3 years, we know in the state of Texas that we annually supply this information to our state education agency. And we do this through supplemental reports, also through the consolidated applications that you fill out through e-grants. We are making sure annually that we are keeping the Texas Education Agency apprised of the progress and that we are, in fact, genuinely fulfilling the intent and purpose of the programs that we're receiving federal dollars for. So getting back to the statute, they want to make sure that the programs we're enacting with our kiddos actually genuinely have a positive impact on their participants' ability to maintain and improve educational achievement and to graduate, to accrue school credits, to make the transition to a regular ed program, to complete high school and attain employment, and then as appropriate to participate in post-secondary ed and job training programs. In addition, when you're conducting this evaluation, we are required to use multiple and appropriate measures of student progress. Multiple being a key portion of this, because this does not mean that I am using just STAR, of course, or this does not mean that I'm just looking at the recidivism rate when we're talking specifically about this population. We want to make sure that we are, in fact, using multiple and appropriate measures. This last piece here, evaluation results. Each state and LEA shall submit evaluation results to the state educational agency and the secretary, and use these results of the evaluations to plan and improve subsequent programs for participating children and youth. So not only are we enacting the program, we're evaluating its effectiveness, and then from there, we're deciding whether or not this program is worthy of the investment of the resources for us to continue. And by worthy, we're double checking to make sure that the factors we're looking for, so graduation, academic achievement, continuation within the education itself, the program itself, before they get to, say, post-secondary ed, and hopefully going on to post-secondary ed or career. I want to show you a portion out of ESSA that relates to Title I Part D, specifically the accountability portion. All parts of the title programs are important, but I want to key in on the fact that there is a strong accountability measure within Title I Part D. It comes specifically from section 1426 within the statute, and it references the reduction and or termination of funding. So directly from statute, please note that the state of Texas can reduce or terminate funding for projects if an LEA does not show progress in reducing dropout rates for male students and for female students over a 3-year period. This is another reason why within the program evaluation process, specifically for Title I Part D, it is very important that you are effectively evaluating it and that you're effectively evaluating it for the implementation and then the fidelity of the implementation as well. Because in ESSA, it does say that a state can reduce or terminate altogether funding for this subpart if there is not enough growth and a reduction in the dropout rates over a 3-year period. And lastly, they can also reduce or terminate funding or require correctional facilities or institutions for neglected or delinquent children and youth to demonstrate, after receiving assistance for 3 years, that there has been an increase in the number of children and youth returning to school, obtaining a secondary school diploma or its recognized equivalent, or obtaining employment after such children and youth are released. So with our correctional facilities and institutions for neglected or delinquent children, if they're receiving this Title I Part D funding, they also are held to the same standards that we are as LEAs within the education system. So again, if we're not showing significant progress or a reduction in dropout rates or an increase in the students actually returning to school, getting their diploma or the equivalent, and getting employment or going on to post-secondary ed, funding can be reduced or terminated altogether. Okay, so now I want to show you quickly the program evaluation process. And again, if you would like a more detailed version of this and how to engage in it, I highly recommend you check out our general program and tips webinar that's also found in the program evaluation series online learning center section. So to remind us, the evaluation process basically looks at what it is that we set out to do at the beginning, what we actually did, what we accomplished, and then lastly, to the degree in which we accomplished it. So with that in mind, your evaluation has to be planned from the start. It's going to include collecting your baseline data. Your baseline data helps you at the end, when we're doing the program evaluation, to be able to objectively observe and identify, did the program itself have positive impact on the kids? And if so, based on this data, we can then start making decisions and evaluating the impact of the program and deciding whether or not we want to continue with this. Now, data, as we know, should be multiple measures, should come from a variety of sources, not just quantitative, not just qualitative. We want a good mix. And you can collect data from your fund sources, your budget summaries, your CNA, of course, because your CNA is the rock, it is the foundation. That comprehensive needs assessment lets us know these are the needs and these are opportunities for growth. And these are the strengths that we have as an organization, as an LEA, and as a campus. And based on the needs that we identified in that, we then are going to put into place actions or strategies or steps to address those needs in the improvement plans, be it the district or the campus. So you can pull your data from there as well. It's not going to just be, one resource that you can pull your data from. And as you're looking at this, you're evaluating this program at the end of our 17-18 year, if you realize that you don't have as much data as you would like, know going forward that I need to plan that for my 18-19 year. I need to plan gathering baseline data. I need to plan making sure that I have multiple sources of data and that they're coming from a variety of places, which will give me an overall cumulative look as to the strength of the program itself. And if the program isn't one that works for our specific student population, and that's fine, that happens. A research-based program doesn't mean that it's going to garner the same results for everyone. So if it doesn't benefit our students, what are we going to do going forward? And that's part of the purpose of conducting the program evaluation process. Now, what you see here on the screen is a 5-step program or 5-step option for evaluating your programs that you are instilling within your LEA. I do want to let you know that the ESSA nor does the Texas Education Code, or TAC, dictate or tell you exactly how to evaluate your programs. The requirement is just that you evaluate the program, but there is not a direct or specified, you must do it this way format out there. What you see here are five steps to evaluating your programs that was provided to us by the agency when we were still under Nickleby. Now, I'm including this here because the program evaluation process, the steps are the steps. That has not changed. We have not received anything as of yet that's specific to program evaluation under ESSA. But again, there's nothing in that program evaluation process guidance booklet that was released by the agency that is so singularly specific to No Child Left Behind that you cannot use it to evaluate your programs now that we're under ESSA. This is just a suggested process, and if you choose not to take this approach, that's at your discretion. Just make sure you are evaluating your program. So under the recommendation that we received previously, the 5 steps you see on the screen include listing your needs, identifying your strategies, identifying your funds, reviewing your data, and lastly, evaluating the impact of the program. So step 1, what you see here is a screenshot of the tool that was provided, again, when we were under No Child Left Behind, which is why you see it over there in the corner. Again, there's nothing about the tool that the agency provided that is so specific to Nickleby that we cannot use it and just, change out student achievement to an appropriate or applicable source under ESSA. You can use this same format because it just covers your data sources that were reviewed. It also covers your strengths, your needs, and then you summarizing the needs. So under step 1, when we're looking at listing the needs they're referring to come from your CNA. This is not subjective. This comes directly from the data that you pulled when you engaged in that CNA process. Identifying the strategies says using the district and or campus improvement plan, identified strategies or initiatives that address these program needs and were connected to this federal program. What you see here is a snapshot of a template of a campus improvement plan, because when we're talking about strategies, this should directly come from our improvement plan, be it your campus or your district. We've identified our needs through the CNA. We decided that based on these needs, these specific strategies or initiatives would be the best for us to implement to combat that need that we found. So I'm pulling this directly from my improvement plan. What you see here is another screenshot from another page within an improvement plan. It's just a general template. You see the strategies and action steps there listed as a header. So when I'm looking at my program evaluation, I'm pulling my plan, I'm having a look at the strategies that we implemented this year. Step 3 is identifying the funds. So identify the amount of funds expended to implement the strategy or initiative, if applicable. The if applicable portion means it may not have cost me anything to actually engage with this strategy. It may not have cost me anything to actually present this and utilize it across my campus, and that's fine if it didn't. It could have been maybe a mentoring program, specifically when we're referencing our Title I Part D, to help the kiddos stay within school, and the mentors could have been mentors from the campus itself. So maybe you didn't necessarily need additional funding in order to be able to enact that strategy or initiative. However, if I did say engage in a mentoring program, that should have been identified within the improvement plan, which is why I put another screenshot of a page from your improvement plan. That strategy and action step is there. The person responsible, the resources, that column should also include your funding. So when we're in step 3, identify funds, in that resources column, there should be an indicator as to how much we anticipated that specific strategy or initiative costing in order for us to actually enact it. So with identifying funds, it can and should come from your CIP or DIP. There are some funding sources, not just federal, but also state allotments, wherein it is a requirement to have the funding source within the plan, because that plan is an auditable document and it's part of what you actually submit when that particular funding source is reviewed. Okay, So you can pull it also from your improvement plan. Also pull your funds when you're identifying funds from your budget summary reports and other fund sources that you have. Step 4 in the process is to review your data. So again, I'm pulling my CNA information because we know what our data sources are. We can pull those straight from the CNA if you'd like. It says review data identified to measure the fidelity of implementation and the impact of the strategy or initiative on student outcomes. It all ties back to student achievement. And with our Title I Part D, the student achievement, the way it looks under that statute would be retention in school. We're actually staying in our primary school and not having to be educated in an alternative facility or a correctional facility. And under Title I Part D, academic achievement or student success, student outcome, a positive student outcome would also include graduating from high school. It would also include going on the post-secondary education. It may also include going to a trade school of some kind. So there are a variety of ways in which student outcomes or positive student outcomes under this specific federal program would look. It's not just letters and grades. I also included a snapshot of a curriculum assessment just as a reminder that you can pull data from a variety of places. It's not just one location. And again, we need to make sure that it's multiple measures and that we are also pulling them from both qualitative and quantitative sources. Additional data sources, when we're referencing our kiddos that are served specifically under Title I Part D, you may also want to include your attendance. Something else that shows that our students are coming back to school and staying in school with us through completion. And maybe if you have, say, that mentoring program, you can include sign-in sheets from that as well. You can include results of a survey if you're asking students, you know, how the program that we're enacting with them has been benefiting them, has it been benefiting them, suggestions and recommendations to help with keeping them retained at the school, meeting minutes if you have any of that. All of that could also be included as data. And the very last piece is going to be evaluate your impact. So I looked at my needs because we pulled our CNA out to make sure that we correctly identified the needs, again, that we said at the beginning of the year we had. From there, we also looked at the strategies that we put in place to address those needs. Step 3 was looking at the funds. Step 4 was then in turn looking at the data itself and making sure that the data that we pulled told a story. It doesn't mean that it's going to necessarily support the program, program in this case being, you know, Big P, the Title I Part D program, but it's still data that we need to look at. So the very last piece of this is evaluating the impact. Evaluate the impact and make recommendations for continuation, modification of the strategy or the initiative. So in short, I put here just a little quick heat map for you to have a look at, just as a reminder. We're just having final looks, you know, was the impact of this program successful, or was this impact one that, you know, didn't have the biggest bang that we thought it would have? So maybe we want to either scale it back, maybe we want to get rid of the program altogether, or maybe we want to continue that strategy or initiative with just some modifications. And this time when I'm saying program, when I say get rid of the program, I'm not referencing Title I Part D, Subpart 2. I'm referencing, you know, if it was a mentoring program, if it was a tutorial program, things like that's what I mean when I'm saying program. That was a very quick version of how you would perform your program evaluation process, overlooking the other pieces that are involved in it. Again, if you want to see the general tips one, have a look on our online learning center. Now, the concept of reasonable, necessary, allowable, and allocable, typically you see referencing Title I Part A. I am also showing this here for Title I Part D because it still is just good practice to consider when you're looking at your cost and looking at, is this something that we believe would help to fulfill the grant and the program intent, and we believe would be a good usage of the funding. You kind of want to sort of keep some of this, the ideology and the thought process behind this going through your mind, because there are still some requirements that we have to have when looking at, can I spend this funding this way? So reasonable. Determine the reasonableness of a cost by considering whether it meets the following. The cost is of a type generally recognized as ordinary and necessary for the operation. Restrictions or requirements are imposed for generally accepted sound business practices, which includes your arm's length bargaining. Individuals are acting with prudence in the circumstances of responsibility, and there are no significant deviations from established practices of the organization. Allowable. To be allowable to be charged to the grant, costs must meet the following criteria: be responsible for the performance of the grant and be allocable under the applicable cost principles, conform to limitations of exclusions, be consistent with policies and procedures. That consistency is very important. We cannot say, okay, well, with this one, we're going to do this, but next time we'll do that. You want to make sure that you're consistent with the policies and procedures as an entire organization, as a LEA, as a local education agency, not just based on the campus and not just, well, for this funding source versus this. You want to be consistent with your policies and procedures to federally or state funded activities that are funded from other sources. Be accorded consistent treatment among all grant programs. Be determined in accordance with GAAP. Not be included as a cost or used to meet the cost sharing or matching requirements, and then not to be used for lease purchases for discretionary grants. Now, the last piece of the RNAA is allocable cost. The following guidelines apply to allocable cost. A cost is allocable to a particular grant in accordance with the relative benefits. It is incurred specifically for the grant, and any cost allocable to a particular grant or other cost objective may not be shifted to other federal awards. That doesn't mean that you're not coordinating your funds. They're saying that you're not shifting to other federal awards to overcome funding deficiencies that are there. So again, even though RNAA, your reasonable, necessary, allowable, and allocable, specifically refers to, and we typically only use it towards Title I Part A, this is just good best practices kind of to think about when you're looking at your funding for your Title I Part D and you're evaluating your program and trying to justify whether or not the impact of the program was one that we want to continue or get rid of. Now, under Title I Part D, there is another section that is called the Local Education Agency Application. That's Section 1423. This is basically your plan for services. I want to share this with you because when you accepted this funding at the beginning of the year, you also filled out an application saying this is what we're going to do. So when you're evaluating your program, in short, you're going back to say, did I actually do everything that I included in this application and said at that time that we were going to do? So let's look at your plan for services and what you were required to include. There's 13 pieces. The first says that each local education agency desiring assistance under this subpart shall submit an application to the state that contains such information that they may require. Each application shall include a description of the program, 2, a description of formal agreements regarding the program, and that's going to be between the LEA and the correctional facility or alternative school program, serving children and youth involved in the juvenile justice system. Part 3, as appropriate, a description of how participating schools will coordinate with facilities working with delinquent children and youth to ensure that such children and youth are participating in an education program comparable to one operating in the local school that the youth would attend, meaning if they weren't at this alternative placement facility. Number 4, a description of the program operated by participating schools for children and youth returning from correctional facilities, and as appropriate, the types of services that such schools will provide such children and youth and other at-risk children and youth. 5, a description of the characteristics of the children and youth who will be returning from correctional facilities, and as appropriate, other at-risk children and youth expected to be served by the program, and a description of how the school will coordinate existing educational programs to meet the unique educational needs of such children and youth. Remember at the beginning of this, I said when we were looking at the program purpose of Title I Part D from the state level and then also from the LEA level, I mentioned that there could be some coordination there because this particular grant looks at meeting the needs of children and youth who are neglected, delinquent, or considered at risk. So that would include, of course, our potential dropout students. So here, number 5, it's basically saying, hey, I'm also going to look at coordinating funding so that this Title I Part D can stretch as far as possible and have the biggest impact as we can possibly have for this population. Number 6, in the application, you said that you would describe schools or how the schools will coordinate with the existing social, health, and other services to meet the needs of the students returning from correctional facilities, at-risk children or youth, and other participating children or youth, including prenatal health care and nutrition services related to the health of the parent and the child or youth, parenting and child development classes, childcare, targeted reentry and outreach programs, referrals to the community resources, and scheduling flexibility. Number 6 has a lot of pieces to unpack. I just want to remind you that, of course, there's always going to be a parent and family engagement component, really, in every Title I part you can come up with. Because, again, Title I at its core is making sure that traditionally underserved students receive the benefits, receive the services that they are entitled to. Number 7, as appropriate, a description of any partnerships with local businesses to develop training, curriculum-based youth entrepreneurship education, and mentoring services for participating students. And number 8, as appropriate, a description of how the program will involve parents in efforts to improve the educational achievement of their children, assist in dropout prevention activities, and prevent the involvement of their children in delinquent activities. As I mentioned before, there are 13, so let's keep going to the last 5. Number 9, a description of how the program under this subpart will be coordinated with other federal, state, and local programs, such as programs under Title I of Public Law 105-220 and vocational and technical education programs serving at-risk children and youth. Number 10, a description of how the program will be coordinated with programs operated under the Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act of 1974 and other comparable programs, if applicable. 11, as appropriate, a description of how schools will work with probation officers to assist in meeting the needs of children and youth returning from correctional facilities. 12, a description of the efforts participating schools will make to ensure correctional facilities working with children and youth are aware of a child's or youth's existing individualized education program, because again, we have to make sure we're meeting all of their needs, and this does include individuals with disabilities. And 13, as appropriate, a description of the steps participating schools will take to find alternative placements for children and youth interested in continuing their education but unable to participate in a regular public school program. I showed you this because, again, when you filled out the application, and this here was just a reading of the application requirements, you assured the agency that you had a plan for all 13 of these, because all 13 of these are requirements within the application. So when you're thinking about evaluating your program, go back, have a look. You said you would do these things. So what are you specifically doing to meet the needs of each of these 13 pieces? I also, just side note, want to let you know, Section 1425 of the ESSA also includes program requirements for correctional facilities. As we said in the program purpose of this, when we're looking at state educational agency and then Subpart B, which is a local education agency, funding can also be received for correctional facilities as well. So correctional facilities have their own requirements, and that's Section 1425. Okay, now I want us to go into examples of program expenditures. Allowable or unallowable? Principal Oliver wants to utilize Title I Part D Subpart 2 funding to pay for transition services of students from the local correctional facility back to the school environment. The intent is to assist the specific student population to motivate them to stay and graduate from school. Under Section 1424, use of funds. In general, funds provided to LEAs under this subpart may be used as appropriate for programs that serve children and youth returning to local schools from correctional facilities to assist in the transition of these children and youth to the school environment and help them remain in school in order to complete their education. So this is an allowable usage of the funds. Now, I would want to know a little bit more when we're talking about transition services, because this is a general question that we receive, but you can pay for transition services for this particular population if you can show that it's helping the students to actually stay graduate from school, complete their education. Allowable or unallowable. Book High School utilized Title I, Part D, Subpart 2 funding to pay for dropout prevention programs for its at-risk students. This specific dropout prevention program will also target students battling drug and alcohol challenges. The goal is to surround students with services that will assist them in completing their education. Definitely allowable. Section 1424, uses of funds. It also includes dropout prevention programs which serve at-risk children and youth, including pregnant and parenting teens, children and youth who have come in contact with the juvenile justice system, children and youth at least 1 year behind their expected grade level, migrant youth, immigrant youth, students with limited English proficiency, and gang members. It also supports number 3, which is the coordination of health and social services for such individuals if there is a likelihood that the provision of such services, which also includes your daycare, drug and alcohol counseling, and mental health services, will improve the likelihood such individuals will complete their education. So again, if you're familiar with any of the state allotments, reading this, it does remind you of other services that you can receive under state allotments. It does remind you of the 13 at-risk indicators that we have here in the state of Texas, which also includes pregnant and parenting teens. It also includes students who are behind as far as grade levels. It also includes second language learners. So again, look at the coordination and integration of your funding and coordination across funding sources, because this is Title I, Part D, but we can easily see how it would also be supported and supportive of other state funding sources. Allowable or unallowable. Devonda is a high school student who recently returned from a placement in a correctional facility. She has been extremely focused on her future, applying at several colleges. She has been accepted to several of them, but does not know how to secure funding. Can Principal Hyde use Title I, Part D, Subpart 2 services to assist her with financial aid services? Yes, Principal Hyde can. According to Section 1424, special programs to meet the unique academic needs of participating children and youth, including vocational and technical education, special education, career counseling, curriculum-based youth entrepreneurship education, and assistance in securing student loans or grants for post-secondary education. How do I evaluate this example? This is the Book High School. She wanted to use Title I, Part D, Subpart 2 funding to pay for dropout prevention programs for its at-risk students. This specific dropout prevention program also targets students battling drug and alcohol challenges, with the goal of surrounding these students with services that will assist them in completing their education. If I use the 5-step program or 5-step process that was recommended previously under Nickleby, I would list my needs. So I would go back to my comprehensive needs assessment and say, hey, within that CNA, there should have been a line item or some sources there using data that shows that we have a population of at-risk students. These students, we're also going to find that there's a need for dropout prevention, and that there's also a need based on data that we assist these students or our students in general in battling drug and alcohol challenges. The second step, identifying the strategies. Well, if I'm looking at this particular question, it seems as though they decided within their improvement plan to have a dropout prevention program, and that this dropout prevention program would serve several functions. One, of course, being academic, but the second would be helping these particular students with their drug and alcohol challenges. The third step, again, identifying the funds, that would also come from the improvement plan. When I had that strategy in action, an initiative, I should have also had under resources exactly how much in general, I shouldn't say exactly, so in general, how much we anticipated this program costing in order for us to meet these students' needs. Fourth step would have been reviewing the data. So I want to look at my baseline data at the beginning of the year. What were our, and you could also look at carryover data from the previous year, but what did we find as far as our dropout rates? Did we also find that we had, again, the challenges with drug and alcohol? And what was the data to support that there were challenges with drug and alcohol? Was there an increase of drug or alcohol related violence on the campus? Was there an increase of drug and alcohol related incidences on the campus? Is the school resource officer reporting through data that there was an increase of drugs and alcohol found on the campus? Did the drug dogs come through? So you see where I'm going with this. You'll be able to pull, and you should be able to pull data if you're identifying this specific need, a need as such as this, battling drug and alcohol challenges, and how this relates to dropout and wanting to address the dropout prevention. You have data to pull if you are pulling your data from multiple sources. And then the very last piece would be evaluating the impact. So when looking at this program, were we able to find, in program here being lowercase p program, small program, this dropout prevention program specifically, were we able to find that there was an increase in success, student success? And again, under Title I Part D, student success is not just academic. Now it is academic because we want to make sure that the students are graduating from high school. We want to make sure that they're staying and matriculating through the system. However, it's also whether or not the students went on to post-secondary ed. Did they go on to employment? Did they have entrepreneurship opportunities? It's not just academic in nature. So when I go through those 5 steps at the end, my program evaluation committee, of which there, of course, would be a committee, would be able to sit back and objectively say, hey, based on the data, based on the 5 steps that we engaged in, the needs, the strategies, the funding, the data, we've evaluated all of this, and we found the impact of these dropout services, which also supports the alcohol and drug abuse challenges that we have on this campus or within the LEA at large. So we're going to continue this, or we're going to continue it with some modifications. Maybe the time of day that this particular dropout prevention program was implemented, we found through this program evaluation process was not the ideal time, or it just did not work at all. Because again, something can be research-based and be an awesome program, but not necessarily be the best program to meet the needs of the students that we're serving. So that's a quick way of being able to walk through and evaluate a specific strategy or need for this particular program. Program meaning a small p program, the dropout services. What you would do would be to engage in that same process, but for each of the strategies and or initiatives that you enacted under your Title I Part D funding in order to address the particular needs and the very specific needs for children and youth who are identified as being neglected, delinquent, or at risk. Remember, what you're trying to gauge is whether or not the program itself, and program large P, the Title I Part D, was actually worthy of the investment of the resources. Did we actually set out and do and accomplish everything that we said we were going to? When I said yes to those 13 things that were on the local education application that we reviewed, you're in essence trying to make sure when you're evaluating the program that you did in fact do all 13 of those things, and then some if you have an ambitious program. So going into closing, but before we go there, I want to show you the ESSA reporting. I want to show you the schedule that's involved with it and the compliance evaluation reports. Now, I cut out the information of the specific LEA. If you did not receive Title I Part D program, your portion of the ESSA Consolidated app looks like this. And it does show you that Part 2 was hidden because you didn't apply. Part 3 of this particular portion of the application was hidden because you did not apply. So Title I Part D, as we know, doesn't apply to everyone. It applies to a relatively small group within our region. If you applied and accepted it because you are actually operating this program, I pulled one from one of our LEAs, and that big orange block there is me hiding the facility name. But you'll see here, this is what within your application, if you actually are receiving this as a grant funding source, what the program description or the program schedule looks like. Okay, this is one from the 17-18 ESSA Consolidated Federal Grant application. This is the compliance report from 16-17 Nickelby. The reason why I'm including 16-17 is because we do not have the 17-18 compliance report specific to Title I Part D, Subparts 1 and 2 yet that are available for us to show. So I do want to just let you know, when you pull this report, if you had this report from last year, the 16-17, it's about 12, 13 pages worth of information. And what it goes through, in addition to the things you see here on the screen, are also the 13 pieces that you attested to when you filled out the LEA application. Because again, when you're evaluating your program, you are double checking and proving whether or not this was a good investment of the resources. And then also with Title I Part D, you're showing that you actually did do all 13 of those things that were within the application that you said you were going to do. That's it. I want to show you the other program evaluation series sessions that we have coming up. On next Tuesday, we will be covering Title II, the Teacher and Principal Training and Recruiting. And then we'll conclude, as I said earlier, on June 4th with Title V Part B. I want to show you a couple of resources as well. Of course, the statute is your friend. Go to the U.S. Department of Education to read ESSA. You see a little arrow there in the corner. It lets you know exactly what the statute says. If you want to go to our Title I Part A website, and that's region10.org/Title I, click on the Title I Part A tab. If you scroll down, you'll see a variety of resources, but specifically you'll see the Nicholby Program Evaluation and the Program Evaluation Toolkit. The reason why I have that there, and we still have this on our site, because again, we have not received one for ESSA yet from the agency, but as a reminder, as you saw when we went through the program evaluations process, those 5 steps, there's nothing in that booklet that is so specific to ESSA that you could not utilize it when evaluating your, that's so specific to Nicholby that you could not use it when evaluating your ESSA programs. The only thing that you'll find that's specific to Nicholby is that with the top like half of each page, you'll see like a domain and a tool that references student achievement, because that was one of the areas under a Title I school-wide program, those 10 components. But again, the rest of the tool is fine. Just take out the description of student achievement. You are still going to pull data. You're still going to identify your data sources and so forth and so on, as we looked at earlier. This is a screenshot of the program evaluation booklet. Again, evaluating your program is evaluating your program. You can just disregard the Nicholby portion of that. I also want to show you the region10.org capacity building initiative. That program is overseen by Tony Garrett. She's a program coordinator here at the Region 10 ESC, and it is funded by the Texas Education Agency. So the capacity building initiative has a lot of resources. As you can see from the screenshot, it also covers the TEA priorities, compliance, ESSA support, distinguished schools, best practices, and Title I Part D. So ESCs and COP, those two little portions there that you see, unless you are a member of either an ESC or a COP, you will not have access to those 2 tabs, but everything else from the overview down to Title I Part D, you'll be able to go through their free resources there, and she has an abundance of resources on this particular page. So if you click on the Title I Part D, it takes you to a page that gives you the description of it. It takes you to, and within that page as well, it talks about administering the formula programs. It gives you some best practices and action profile forms. It also gives you the statute and the guidance. So if you want to see it again, she also has some resources listed there. And if you see down towards the bottom, there's a link for the Title I Part D Texas Education Agency webpage. This concludes our time together. If you have any questions or you have feedback about anything that we did not get an opportunity to maybe address during our time together in this webinar, please feel free to reach out to us. Tony Garrett is a program coordinator, once again, under the Title I Capacity Building Initiative. We also have Laura Griffin, who serves P&P, Becky Book, who serves data allotments, as well as the ESSA SSA. Myself there in the middle, Lauren McKinney, I serve ESSA SSA. And then also, as does Jodelle Bland, who also serves the ESSA and SSA. Once again, this has been the program evaluation series. The specific topic was prevention and intervention programs for children and youth who are neglected, delinquent, or at risk. Title I, Part D, Subpart 2. Thank you for joining me today. If you have any other questions or if there's anything else that we can do to be of further assistance, do not hesitate to reach out to us. Have a great one.